What is going on, guys? Broken Machine here. Hope you guys are all doing good today. Welcome to an updated settings guide. We're going to go through all the options that I use and the new additional options included in the October update. This one isn't scripted, so we're going to do it casual and just go through each one piece by piece. Alright, let's do this. So I'm going to start off with video. Brightness, I would recommend somewhere between 50 and 70% too low, and it'll be quite difficult to see people in dark corners, and if you go too high, you'll get a rather washed out image. However, I do recommend setting this all the way up to 100 when you're playing the night maps. Definitely makes a difference on those. Now down below we have field of view for first person and third person as well. I have these both set to 74 or horizontal 90. Field of view is essentially the extent of the observable world in front of you. Now if you go too low on the FOV, targets will appear much larger, but you lose that peripheral vision. If you go too high on the FOV, targets become much smaller, are quite difficult to aim at, and appear further away. Horizontal 90 is a sweet spot that I would definitely recommend. ADS field of view, I have this off. If you turn it on, it applies the field of view you just selected to when you're also aiming down sight. Personally, I like this off, so when you're aiming down sight, there's a little bit of extra zoom. Have a little play and see what works for you. Now, motion blur, you want to drop this down to 0%, and that will turn off motion blur completely. In the October update, they've addressed a bug where before, if you had this on 0%, it actually wasn't on 0 and it was still there. So if you turn off this completely, you'll gain some graphical performance gains, that's some FPS gains as well, and the game will look nice and clean. Weapon depth of field, this is personal preference. I prefer this to be off. Have a look on screen and see what you like. Personally, I find that with this on, my aiming is much worse, especially at longer ranges with the iron sight sniper rifles. Now, chromatic aberration, this is the color fringing along high contrast edges. No need for this to be on, same for the film grain effect. Turn both of these off and you'll get a much crisper and cleaner image. Down below, we have some colorblind options. If you're colorblind, have a play with these. Now let's move on to audio. Master volume, 100% of course. No need to set it any lower. Now music volume, I normally have this on 0%, but when I'm streaming, I turn this up just a little bit so we got some background music for my audience. Output configuration, if you have surround, set this to surround. If you have stereo, put it on stereo. I have the Astro A40 TRs, and this setup works for me with the surround on and the Logitech Pro G headset. I imagine this headset setting will work out for most players, so definitely give it a go and see what you think. If your TV isn't that great, you may want to try war tapes. Say you've got a really kind of just a basic TV setup and the speakers aren't that great, war tapes should be pretty good. Now these voice options below are personal preference. English for me, my team speaks my language, set that to off. You kind of get a more authentic experience. All the soldiers speak their languages, so I prefer that to be able to set to that. Game announcer voice, I turn this on. I want to know what's going on in game, and I prefer this to be on female. I don't mind the male voice, but I find it a little bit too distracting, I've got to be honest. I think the female version is much softer, and you can hear it in the background, but it doesn't take over, and that works for me. Personal preference again, see what works for you. VoIP, turn this on if you want to talk to and listen to people in your squad and chat with them. Microphone volume, you'll have to have a play with this yourself, but 50% should work for most. Subtitles, leave on or off. It's up to you, personal preference again. Now gameplay. Show HUD if you want to see everything on screen. Turn it off if you want a more difficult experience. Would not recommend. Player created content. If you don't want to see player created content, just turn this off. Personal preference again. Chat log and inventory. I set these when active so I can see around the screen more easily. When there's nothing going on, you don't really need these to be on, so when active works for me. Crosshair visibility. I imagine 100% would work for most people. Have a play of this. This just affects the opacity of the crosshair. Some people may want to drop it down a bit, but I think most people would want to leave this on 100. Now, crosshair color, I have this on red at the minute. I've been testing all different ones and I'm quite enjoying red at the minute, but a nice green, maybe a kind of orangey or a bright blue, those are the popular choices. I would recommend using a white or maybe even a black as well. But again, personal preference, see what works for you. give it a go, test it out. A lot of people, they like it nice and bright so it's easily seen. Some people, they find that quite distracting, so they'll go for a dark black or a dark red, maybe a dark blue. But again, personal preference. Kill log, that turns on the kill feed. Kill log filter, you can adjust what you see on the kill feed. I personally have this on all, that works for me. Awards, I don't need to see awards, no need for that. Turn on vehicle seat info. If you turn this on, there'll be a little icon at the bottom of the screen right in the middle when you're in a vehicle, and it'll show you who's in which seat and which are empty. Critical messages, turn this on, and share usage data, turn this on as well. If there's any bugs in the game, any crash reports and that kind of thing, that'll get sent to EA and DICE, and hopefully they can use that to fix the game. Now moving on to hit indicator visibility, 100% works here, don't think you really need to change that. And hit color, headshot color, and kill color, I have a kind of setup here that really helps me speed up my gameplay. So I've got blue for standard hits, red for headshots, and green for kills. So if I get a headshot, I know I've done a lot of damage, it's going to show up red, so I know I might need just a body shot, or that player, I can tell my teammates he's a one shot or he's really low health, something like that. And green for a kill, so as soon as the green pops up, I know to snap onto a new target or get to cover and be on my way. Definitely recommend having a system like this. It definitely helps speed up your gameplay, makes you more accurate and more deadly. So do recommend something similar. Damage based shape, turn it on, and your hit indicator will change shape and size based on the damage type. So if it gets bigger, you've done more damage, and that can really help you out in game. Now, minimap settings, these are all personal preference. One thing I would recommend is show stationary weapons to all. So all these stationary weapons on the minimap will show up and you can see if there's anybody on them or not or whatever. So definitely recommend you turn that on. This is all personal preference, of course, but if you'd like something similar or exactly the same as mine on screen right now, definitely copy these settings. I have the minimap quite large and quite a bit of zoom so I can see all around me, and that's very effective in really difficult and tight areas where I'm probably not going to survive. So if I can see what's going on around me, I can make better decisions. Now at the bottom here we have some default icon opacity options here. Again, these are all personal preference. One thing I will say though, I do turn down this objective icon opacity while aiming down sight. So for example, say I was on an objective or pushing up to an objective, the icons wouldn't get in the way while I'm aiming down sight, so I'm not going to miss any enemies who may be in that part of the screen. Definitely recommend you adjust this one. The other ones again are personal preference. Now moving on to advanced camera shake scale, definitely recommend turning this all the way down to 30%. This adjusts the strength of the camera shake caused by explosions. So if you've got this really high, the screen is going to be shaking all over the place, your aim is going to be off, you're going to miss enemies. Definitely don't leave this on high, so drop it all the way down to 30%. Now soldier auto leading and soldier auto peek. So if you go up to an object and you're crouching, you can aim down sight and you'll peek over the object, or you can go to the edge of a building and aim down sight while standing right next to it and you'll peek around it or lean around it. So definitely recommend leaving these two options on. Parachute auto deploy. If you want your parachute to auto deploy, turn this on. I don't. You know, in some situations it can cost you, so I like to deploy myself. Now context-based order giving. Now if you're the squad leader, you can turn this on, and instead of having to bring up the camaros, or however you pronounce it, sorry I probably butchered that, you know, by holding the spot button, you can just instead, you can look straight at the objective and give a squad order and tell them to go and attack or defend that objective. Definitely helpful, recommend turning this on. Now the plane chase camera roll. If you want the camera to roll with the plane, turn it on, turn it off if you don't. Now down below we have aim assist options. We have the auto rotation and slowdown. I have slowdown on so that my aim slows down while I'm aiming down sight if I'm on target, and auto rotation, I have this off. If you have this on, basically if your enemy is in the crosshair and you aim down sight, the game's going to snap to them. Now a lot of players who are new to the game will find this really helpful, but if you're an experienced player, you'll be wanting to go for headshots or aim much higher up the body, and sometimes auto rotation can snap to body parts which you don't want to. If you're an experienced player, you probably want this set off, and if you're trying to get better at the game, I would recommend turning this off. Do leave slowdown on though, that definitely helps you out. Reload hint, leave this on. Hint system, I don't need to know all the hints, so I turn this off. If you're a new player, leave this on. Network performance graph, if you're having issue with the game, turn this on, and in game you'll see a little graph. You can record your gameplay, send it to DICE, and hopefully they can figure out what's the problem, or you can troubleshoot yourself. Aim lead indicator, I leave this on, but I've never seen this icon. Basically, this will indicate if your ping to the server is high, so you'll need to compensate by leading your aim a little more. Now at the bottom here, we have low ping network smoothing. Basically, if you have low ping and you're noticing high ping players are bouncing all over the screen, jittering about, then this will try and smoothen them out and you should have a more consistent experience. However, I'm pretty sure this introduces higher latency, so I have this off. Honestly, I've not seen that many players jitter about on the screen lately, so I would leave this off. If you're having serious issues, definitely maybe turn this on. Now lastly, we have the control options. Vibration at the top here, turn it off. It does affect your aim, especially at long ranges. No need for this to be on. Invert vertical look and flight. Personal preference, use what works for you. Soldier stick sensitivity, recommend somewhere between 20 and 30% for new players. Try 50 if you're more experienced. I use 100%. Do remember there is no best sensitivity. Lower sensitivity means easier aiming. High sensitivity is quicker reactions. There is no best sensitivity, just use what works for you. If you do plan on changing your sensitivity, go up in something like 10, so go from 20 to 30 to 40. Don't just go from 20 to 100. Your aim is going to be all over the place and you're going to ruin your muscle memory. Don't go too high or too low if you're a new player. Just use what works for you, give it a go, and then adjust later on. Gotta start improving your aim first and then sensitivity changes later. Vehicle stick sensitivity, again, this is personal preference. I quite like 60. No need for it to be really high in the vehicles, is there really? Soldier zoom sensitivity, I have this on 100%. So that's 100% of my 100% soldier stick sensitivity. If you want it to be like Call of Duty, set this to 50% and then your soldier zoom, that is while you're aiming down sight, will be half of your soldier stick sensitivity. Remember, 50% is half of the soldier stick sensitivity. If you have 60 on the stick sensitivity, you don't need 60 on the zoom. Just leave it at 100 if you want them feeling the same. Soldier sprint, double tap forward to sprint, and horse sprint, personal preference once again, choose what works for you. Soldier zoom, I like to have this on hold, same for the vehicle weapon zoom, and the steady scope, I have this on hold as well. So when I'm sniping and I need to hold my breath, what I do is scope in, and then when I'm ready to take the shot, I press to steady the scope and I hold it down, and then I take the shot and let it go. Definitely recommend that choice. Some people prefer that to be on press, but again, that is personal preference. Try what works for me and see if it works for you as well. Bayonet charge start here, a new option. Definitely recommend you set this to hold. If you have it to press and you panic, you might set off a bayonet charge that's going to result in a easy death. So definitely recommend you have this on hold. Now control schemes, these again are personal preference. I've got custom on the soldier and gunner buttons, which I'll get to in a moment. Now at the bottom here, I do recommend veteran and legacy for the pilot. These are very simple options here, but very easy to use and it's very easy to get quickly to grips with if you're a new player. So definitely recommend veteran and legacy here. But again, all these are personal preference. Some people might not like my setup, so use what works for you. Now, I will come to that custom options in a moment, but first let's have a look at the advanced options. Now, right at the top here, we have stick aiming acceleration. You want to set this on 0%. So what this does is at 0, there is no acceleration on the sticks at all. If you have acceleration, your aim will never feel truly precise. Now again, this is personal preference. Some people might like the acceleration. Personally though, without the acceleration, your aim is as precise as it could be, as at the best it could be. If you have acceleration, it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. It's not going at full speed. So definitely recommend you set this to 0 and your aim will feel much more responsive. Now moving on to controller left stick and right stick options. I would recommend leaving the actual dead zone and the max input threshold on the default values of 15% and 100% for both sticks here. I've had a play of these options, and I've got to be honest, my aim was much worse when I adjusted these, so personally I definitely recommend leaving these two options alone on both of these left stick and right stick here. However, I do recommend changing the center dead zone. The dead zone is basically how much the stick needs to be pushed to be activated or where movements are recognized by the game. So if you have this really high, you're going to have to move the stick all the way over before the game recognizes any movement. So obviously that's going to affect your aim and make it really difficult to stay on target. I have this on 11%. I'd recommend somewhere between 10 and 22%. You may be tempted to go really low, but I wouldn't recommend it as your aim will be all over the place. It will become too responsive and it just becomes unmanageable and uncontrollable. Definitely do not recommend. So 10 to 22% and leave these two on default. Now these controller options here for L2 and R2 for the max input threshold, drop these down to 5% and your aiming and firing will become much more responsive. Same on Xbox as well. Now these soldier zoom sensitivity options, I would recommend leaving these on 100% so they all feel the same. The reason is because down below here I also have the uniform soldier aiming set to on. Now what this does is basically it makes all sights and scopes feel the same in terms of sensitivity. So if you were using a pistol and you aimed 90 degrees to the left and moved over, and then you did the same with a sniper scope, both would feel exactly the same in terms of sensitivity. So if you leave all these options on 100, all your scopes, all your sights, everything in the game is going to feel exactly the same. Highly recommend you do this. There is a coefficient option at the bottom here. Leave this on default. If you go searching around the internet, you will find many forum posts of people arguing about this, and the DICE employees actually recommend 133%, so I would leave it as that, and that works for me. Check out my aim, it's pretty good, definitely try that yourselves. However, I will say you may want to change some of these field guns. They are quite slow, so you may want to turn these up a bit. When you're on these field guns, around the map, you don't really need super precise aim, so you might want to turn these up just a little bit. Now there is some extra options here. Vehicle aim relative control. So this one's a bit of a weird one. If you have this on and you're sat in a tank and you turn the turret to the rear of the vehicle, and you press forward to go forward in your tank, what will happen is the vehicle will actually go in reverse, so it follows the direction of the turret. Sounds kind of confusing? Yes, definitely is. So I would turn this off. Some people might like this though, so personal preference once again. Below here we have decouple aiming from turning. If you turn this on, you can aim in the vehicles while still being able to drive it as well, so your analog sticks aren't affected by the driver of the vehicle. Definitely recommend turning this on. Same for the vehicle passenger control as well. Now moving on to the last thing here, custom controls here. So here I've got these custom soldier buttons on the soldier and gunner options here, and if you set that to custom or any of these options to custom, exit here and go down here to the custom controller mappings. Now I've adjusted a few things here, so I've got spot on R2, and down below here I've got firing on R1 and zooming or aiming down sight with L1, and we also have down here L2 on the throw grenade. Now before I said it was much easier to aim with L1 and R1 or the front triggers on Xbox, so I've adjusted these here. Definitely recommend doing the same if you want a much more responsive experience. I also have crouch on R3. I have this on crouch press and prone hold. Now you could have it on toggle if you wish, but I personally find this works for me. So I can press it to slide or crouch, and I can slam it to drop shot and hopefully win a gunfight. Definitely do not recommend drop shotting in BF1. It doesn't really work, and there's a brief moment where you can't fire. So not the best strategy, but there are some rare situations where it can work. But that is pretty much everything. Yeah, it is. So it has been a long one today, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this video. These are all my settings. Copy them if you wish. Definitely do recommend adjusting some of these. A lot of people will just go into the game with default settings and you're gonna be at a massive disadvantage. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. Please drop a like if you did. If you got annotations turned on, the left video will take you to a new tutorial and the right video will take you to yesterday's gameplay. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys soon. Take it easy.